I'm Pam Parton, and this is the data overview for Worth County Middle School in Sylvester, Georgia. We're going to be meeting with the Gifted Department Data team to look over some data. Our purpose here is going to be to look at the content mastery for our CCRPI, which of course goes back to Georgia milestones, and we're going to try to look at some of those strengths and weaknesses and see if we can help some of our higher achieving students who fall into the gifted range to reach some learning goals, see what kind of instructional changes and areas for increase we need to look at. Now, this is just showing you just some background information about Worth County Middle School. This shows you for our entire district what our enrollment has been for the last several years. It also shows you what our enrollment has been for our school. You can see that we have had a slight decline in numbers, and it's starting to go back up, and it has increased again this year as well. So we're now at 751 students. Worth County Middle is the only middle school in the county, so it's the only one for our district. There are only 4 schools in our entire district, so we're not really being able to be compared to another school within our district, but we can look at some of the overall scores that we have for our district, and we can look at data that compares to the state as well. Just giving a little bit of background on some of our teachers at the middle school for the past several years. A lot of our ethnicities kind of fall in line, not quite to the extremes as the same as our students do. We do have primarily white teachers in our school, and that, of course, you can see that the numbers have kind of fluctuated a little bit, but they've stayed pretty steady. Which you can see that we've maintained a lot of our same teachers. Our numbers have stayed pretty much the same with just a little bit of changes. This actually shows some of the experience of our teachers, and you can tell that the vast majority of our teachers, about half it looks to be, have from 11 to 20 years of experience teaching. So we do have a lot of veteran teachers. We do have a good many that fall within that 1 to 10 years of experience. Most of those, though, now are between 5 and 10, actually. So we are able to retain a lot of teachers once we get them here. And you can see we do even have, several that are 21 to 30 years of experience. So we're having lots that are coming to our school and staying at our school, which is a good thing because that means that a lot of the implementations and things that we are putting into place can be done and can have a lot of relevance and validity. We can own our data because we know that we all had a part in making all of this data happen. So we're all having a big part in this. As far as our student ethnicity, our system is about 61% white students. The next category would be 32% African American. As I said, our ethnicities kind of tend to mirror what our faculty is as well. We do have a few Hispanic and Asian students and some multiracial students, a few Native Americans, but those are not nearly as prominent as white students and African American students. This is some additional student information for WCMS. We are a Title I school. Every school in Worth County is a Title I school, and we are at 93% free and reduced lunch, so economically disadvantaged. Our mobility rate, or our transiency rate, is 11.8%. That actually has gone down from what it has been in the last couple of years because the year before it was actually at about 18%, so that has reduced substantially. As far as gifted and special education, those are pretty consistent. The gifted percentage is about 10% and special education is about 9%. English language learners, we are a large agricultural community. However, we don't actually have a whole lot of English language learners in our school. I think that falls at 1%. I think that there's only about 6 in the entire school, and that's across all 3 grades, 6, 7, and 8. So we really don't have very many that end up making up that category. So as you can see, when we get later on looking at some of the data, we really aren't able to dig down into those a whole lot because we just don't have enough data on them to look at that subgroup very specifically. As far as what we're going to be looking at and drilling down, we're going to be looking specifically at the mathematics Georgia milestones and the content weights and such, and we're going to be looking specifically at 6th grade. Now, these are going to be 18% geometry, 30% number systems, so that's going to be your biggest one. 12% is ratios and proportional relationships, 17% statistics and probability, and 23% expressions and equations. Now, with all of these, you're going to see those same domain areas and content area weights. The weights are going to be a little bit different once they get to 7th grade, but you are going to see those same domains show up again. As a matter of fact, a lot of these actually end up just being extensions from what they picked up in 6th grade, and just a very small extension is tacked on into 7th grade. So there really is a lot of vertical alignment, a lot of continuity that has happened with the standards in Georgia with mathematics from 6th grade to 7th grade. Now, there are some new things in 7th grade, of course, but with most of these things that are covered in 6th grade, they flow pretty well over into 7th also. Now, these are showing for Georgia, our county, and for our school, the CCRPI single scores. This is the overall score that the school gets, which is based on a couple of different areas that we're going to look at in just a minute. But this shows you a 3-year range for all 3 of these for what has happened with CCRPI scores. Now, as you can tell, the state has consistently increased in their average score, and they're up to a 76.6. The county, the overall score for the county, increased a good bit in 2016-17, but dropped just slightly in 2017-18. Our school, however, has seen some big jumps since 2015-16. We started in 15-16 at 60.7, and I believe that might have been the first year of using CCRPI as a scoring tool to report for our schools. So that was kind of a learning year for everybody. We were a good bit below the state average at that point because the state was at 71.5. We were at 60.7. So we were over 10 points below what the score for the state was. We increased a pretty good bit there to 72.6. We were very, very close to the state average at that point because the state average was 73. So very close then, but not quite what our system-wide average was. However, this past year, our school increased to 77.8%. So the school increased, our county decreased a little bit, but the state also increased. That was the first time that we actually were able to have a higher CCRPI score, and we actually were higher than the state average and the rest of the county. So remember those, we only have 4 schools in our county, so it was just that was the average of the 4 scores for each one of those schools. So good increases are happening, and we're going to look in just a second at what's actually happening with CCRPI and what makes up those scores. This actually breaks down that score that we had that was the 77.8. There are a couple of different areas that they actually look at and give you credit for. One of those is content mastery, which is actually what we're going to drill down into and look a little bit deeper, because that's actually the one that says are your students proficient or are they distinguished? And so you're actually looking at what their scores are and how they're doing and how that compares to the state. Progress is how much your students are actually growing, so that takes into account those student growth percentiles that we've heard so much about. Closing gaps is where we are making sure that we don't have large achievement gaps between some of our minority ethnicities as compared to our majority ones. So that was looking pretty, it was much improved. Our progress was much improved. And then the readiness also, that includes for us things like offering classes that can be available at high school credit and some of the different connections classes and things that we're able to offer. Those fall under that, as well as doing things with Georgia College 411 and those sort of things includes all of the readiness to get them ready for careers. Now, looking at the content mastery, Worth County's was 58.9. The middle schools was 58.9. The state's was 65.1. So we were a little bit behind the average there for what the state was. Now, as I mentioned, we're at 58.9, so that is a little bit below what the state is at. Now, that score is actually taken by those students that we have that are at proficient and distinguished on Georgia milestones. Developing, which is considered to be a 2 on the 4-point scale on Georgia milestones. You have beginning is 1, developing is 2, proficient will be 3, and distinguished will be 4. Developing is also considered to be, you're receiving credit for it towards CCRPI. The proficient and the distinguished is going to be primarily what we're going to look more at, because of course you're always going to want your students to be proficient or higher. This score, they arrive at that because there are a couple of different algorithms and things that they have to look at, and there are some different things that they do give you credit for besides just the basic score. You do get a weighted score also based on how many students do you have that fall into that distinguished category, that sort of thing. So there are some different things that fall here that could happen to be able to increase this content mastery score. Now, this impacts us being the gifted team because, let's face it, a lot of our students are going to be some of those higher level students who are going to be getting those distinguished scores. So, in order for us to get our students not just to the proficient level but to the distinguished level, that's going to be something that is definitely going to make this content mastery number for our CCRPI go up, and in turn that's going to make our entire CCRPI single score go up. So those are going to be some of the things that we're going to be looking at to see what it is we need to be working on and what areas, so we can raise our scores more. Now, this just shows you across the board what the actual content mastery was in all content areas. You can tell that there's some very similar things that are going on here. 2018, it appeared that there across the board that was higher in all content areas. There were some different things that occurred in different areas. You had in mathematics in particular, in 2016, it was at 58.9, dropped some, went back up. So you have some different things occurring there. So, all right, now this is taking us down into now not just the content area mastery, because with CCRPI they use in that content area and content mastery, they use your scores from Georgia milestones, those students who would be proficient and above, and the ones that would be developing. And that is how they're working towards developing that score for every school. So actually getting down into percentages for where we stand as far as our students on Georgia milestones, because that's going to be the thing when we get down to Georgia milestones, that's going to be the thing that's going to help us improve that area of content mastery. So we need to see what are we actually making on Georgia milestones now, and how can we improve those. Now, this is our percentage of students that were proficient and above, and this is for the middle school is in green, that's our school, and then the state of Georgia is in kind of the teal color there. So as you can tell, 15, 16, your percentages were honestly not really that high. You ended up having for 15, 16, it was about 23%, and then it dropped down some, and it actually was right around 20%. 2017, 18 for the middle school, it actually was at 30.9, and that actually was the highest proficient and above rating for the entire middle school in Worth County. So that 30.9, that's 3s and 4s. That was for grades 6, 7, and 8. The 6th grade was actually a little bit higher than the 7th and 8th grade. Now, with those 3s and 4s, of course, that is not the only ones that are counted towards CCRPI as far as getting credit for those considering passing. Those developing ones are as well, but we definitely want to be, a lot of our students are on a higher level anyway. Most of ours are in the accelerated math track where they actually get to the point to where they can take Algebra 1 by the time they are in 8th grade. So for our students, we really, really need to have that push for them to be in this proficient and above track. So if we consider that, for example, in 6th grade, you have 9 classes of 6th graders, and 2 of those classes are going to be, that's about 50 students out of about 250. So when you're considering you have those 50 out of that 250, you've got about a fifth of those or so that are, going to end up being, into that category. That a fifth, 20%. Here you end up with your proficient above is actually at 30%. So that means that not only are you going to end up having your gifted and accelerated students, but you need some of the others as well too. So, but you're gifted and accelerated, you definitely need to make sure those have that push towards proficient and above. And so as we're doing that, this just kind of gives you an indicator of this is the actual gifted students from 2017-18 and where they all placed. None of them were at beginning. There were 2 that were at developing. Generally, and most of the time, if you see students that are gifted that are in the developing range, they may not be gifted in the, math may not be their strength. So, they may have had some of the creativity aspect of it, or it may have been the ELA. So there are different areas that are going to be their strengths, and math may not be one of those. Those scores were actually fairly close, like within about 5 to 10 points of being on a level 3, which is a proficient. Most of our gifted students, 19 out of the 28 that we had, actually ended up being proficient, and then we had 7 that were distinguished. Now those 7, that was actually the only 7 out of the entire grade that ended up being on that level 4, that distinguished. I do want to point out too that the 19 that were proficient, there were also about 5 of them that were within 5 points of moving up to the next level as the distinguished as well. So we're very close. We have students who are scoring very, very well, but we need to, as knowing this data now, we need to know, okay, let's look at and let's see and let's brainstorm and see, why is it that our scores are increasing? Why is it that, we're able to push these kids, and what can we do to get that little extra push? So to just kind of summarize what we've talked about, we were below the state average for mathematics scores, but did make some positive gains in 17-18. These could be due to some of the initiatives with the math department. We have gotten several things that we have put into place, and math teachers have received a lot of professional development over. They have worked with our local RESA and implemented a lot of different manipulative use. Our school has purchased a lot of manipulatives to be used in the classroom. And so that, along with ramp up and extended learning time, are really seem to be working to help our math scores, because for the last 3 years, the more that these things have been actually implemented in the classroom, they started out small with just 1 or 2 teachers, and then the more that it has been implemented across the board, the more our math scores have grown. There has been professional development also on direct instruction, which most people that have ever taught math will tell you that there is a certain amount of direct instruction that is going to probably be needed and that will be very effective. There are other methods as well that are effective and that can be used in conjunction, but it's important to realize that with direct instruction, you have to do it the right way. So that's been one of the things that our school has really worked on and has done professional development on, so that people realize it's not just standing there and just, oh, let's work out a bunch of problems, that sort of thing. That direct instruction combined with manipulative use, that has been what's made some of the drives for us. It's been pretty evident with, going from having 1 or 2 teachers to having a few more to now having it pretty much across the board being implemented. The gains are there. We've got to keep up with keeping on implementing and bringing up that rigor as well. Now, as far as some points for discussion, we do have some strengths. The improvements that are happening with our mathematics scores, when they're raised on Georgia milestones, they're going to in turn be raised in our content mastery score, which is going to help our CCRPI score to be higher. So those are all things that are important. Weaknesses, we're still not up to those state averages, even though we have gone through and done professional development, and closing those gaps is still kind of a weak area for us. It's not our strongest one. We've made some gains, but we've still got to work on that so that our minority students could make some of those gains. And that's actually one of what our concentration areas that we're probably going to be looking at, is that working with some of our African American students to try to close some of those gaps, because that's kind of one of those things that will actually help, not just in the closing gaps area, it'll help there, but you're also going to end up with your student growth percentiles and your progress being higher, which is also going to increase your content mastery. So when we do focus on one area and we do get one higher, then we're able to increase pretty much across the board then. So with our things that we have discussed today and going through and talking about our gifted students, we know that our students are capable of these things. We know that they are capable of growth. We have got to keep on increasing the rigor. But some of the things, the takeaways that we may need to take from this are that we do still need to keep working with our minority students. In a lot of cases, they may not be as inclined to come to us and to ask for help, so we need to make sure that we are getting them the help that they need so that we can show those improvements. But also, the thing that we need to keep in mind is that we need to brainstorm and to come up with some more solutions, because even though our professional development and our use of manipulatives and our use of direct instruction, they're all helping, but we are still below the state averages. So what's going on in other places, and what else can we do to make sure that we're increasing that rigor? Because in a lot of ways, that content mastery part where we get credit for a lot of those proficient and distinguished learners, that's falling on a lot of our shoulders. So we really need to make sure that we are coming up with some innovative ways that we can try to increase this, and not just to meet that proficient, but to go ahead and bump those kids up to distinguished.